Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the June 18th, 2026 Council Work Session. We'll begin with Financial Director, Mr. Matthew Masisklis.
Actually, I will punt it off to Mr. Zipfel. I have a few things to talk about, and then he'll start with the CRA, and I will chime in with the financial factors, and then continue with my report after that.
All right, Mr. Zipfel.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Masisklis, and good evening, Council. On your agenda tonight are a few items that I'd like to discuss with you. The first are the two resolutions. Thank you. Two resolutions before you, one of which is a resolution of the statement of services for the potential annexed territory that we've been discussing for the last month and a half, 2 months. This is the exact legislation that I presented before council before. It discusses or outlines the services from the city that would be provided to the territory if it is actually annexed. This is a requirement under ORC 709, ORC Chapter 709, I'm sorry, and the deadline on which the municipality must pass this in accordance with the annexation process is very quick, 25 days, and this must be post-petition filing. So in order to have two full readings for council on this legislation, we wanted to go ahead and go with the first reading tonight. We anticipate filing the petition before the July 9th meeting. So there would be a second reading at the July 9th meeting of this same resolution. Again, I've discussed this resolution in a prior council meeting. We went through with our PowerPoint slides what this actually means. If you have any particular questions on those topics, just let me know. The second one is a resolution consenting to the proposed annexation. Of course, council has already moved and approved filing of the petition. This is, again, just a requirement under Chapter 709 of the revised code that within 30 days after the filing of any petition for annexation, the municipality must pass a resolution either consenting or objecting to the annexation. So both of which are up for first reading tonight. They will be in front of you at the July 9th meeting for second reading.
All right, thank you. And if I remember correctly, in the past when we annexed, we did it on one reading by emergency, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah, because of the time constraints that it put on.
That's correct. So this way we can have two actual readings of the legislation as opposed to suspending the required two readings.
Thank you.
The other ordinance before you tonight is an ordinance approving a community reinvestment area agreement and a related compensation agreement. And before I get into the specific legislation, I want to briefly summarize what we've discussed before regarding an anticipation of this ordinance and what a community reinvestment area actually is, or a CRA area. So the Ohio Community Reinvestment Area Program is an economic development toolkit that's contained in the Ohio Revised Code. It's administered, though, by municipalities and county governments, and it provides real property tax exemptions for property owners who renovate existing or construct new buildings. The city adopted a CRA program approximately 30 years ago, and we've amended it over the years whenever there's new legislature changes from the Ohio legislature to the program. So we've amended this multiple times since we've adopted it. I want to say it was 1994 when we first adopted it, but don't hold me to that. Under this program, or every CRA program, new structures and improvements that meet the minimum requirements are eligible for tax exemption, and that includes all types of structures, whether it's residential, commercial, or industrial. Residential exemptions are actually generally approved for up to 100% of the increase in the improved property value if the owner applies. We have this program within our city. So any improvements to your property, if you'd like to see if you're eligible for a reduction based on, the taxes, based on that real property improvement, we have an application on file for those residential improvements. Now, under the Ohio Revised Code, for any industrial or commercial improvement that applies for a CRA exemption, those must separately be agreed to by a council. So there's no application administrative process where these are automatically granted for commercial or industrial users. they have to go before a council to approve, and they can be specific types based on the type of development. Let's see here. So the project-specific legislation before you tonight would authorize the city to enter into a CRA agreement with Prologis or for the Prologis development. The CRA agreement would provide a 15-year exemption on 75% of the qualifying new structures. Again, this is expressly permitted in both the Ohio Revised Code and our CRA agreement. The land and the remaining taxable value would continue to be taxed at 100%. The agreement does contemplate 1 or 2 data center buildings, with the first 2 buildings each projected at a minimum of 200,000 square feet and at least $600 million in cost. The project is estimated to create at least 120 full-time jobs, new full-time jobs, with an annual payroll of $5 million. The compensation agreement, is a companion document to the CRA agreement. This is actually a voluntary agreement that Prologis has agreed to enter into. It's not required under the CRA agreement. It's above and beyond. Under it, the Prologis has agreed to a payment of $1 million to the school districts, the applicable school districts, split between Edgewood and the Butler County Butler Tech, as well as $200,000 to the city's Water Capital Improvement Fund. As I said before, that the developer is not required to make these payments. They were negotiated by the city on behalf of the school districts. The developers also purchased water and sewer capacity from the city. But I will turn to Matthew at this point and let him talk the specifics of those agreements. I don't want to step on his toes. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So in reference to those payments, it states that essentially the TAP fees as a contingency upon receiving, or the city council approving the CRA, that the TAP fees will all be paid for 4 buildings, even though the CRA only requires 2, or is only specifically calling out 2 buildings, that 4 buildings of TAP fees will be paid up front to the city, and that is based on peak capacity, not our typical daily usage and what we would expect from similar developments. In this CRA agreement, it indicates that those will be paid upon passing. They have already been paid. So we did deposit the $2.7 million in water and sewer tap fees last week. Put them into our Star Ohio accounts, and those will be held for future payment on our continuing, water infrastructure, and particularly the ongoing payments on the water tower when those payments do start. Looking into our projections, we had actually projected, as a result of the construction of that water tower, even though it is a subsidized OWDA loan at a relatively low interest rate, that would constitute a 3.6% annual residential rate increase over the next 5 years. Because the tap fee has been paid up front and those funds are currently invested, held in escrow, and will be paid toward that project, we will not be seeing any residential rate increases for the next 5 years. So 3.6% for 5 years, over 19%, that's a big saving. Now, we are still intent on increasing the higher end user rate. So, the big industrial users, I'm going to pass on as much as we can onto those larger users to keep the residential side flat. Now, that does not mean your full utility bill won't increase, because Rumpke has been passing on a lot of increases, and we've been kind of slow rolling those out. So the Rumpke, the refuse collection will probably be going up when we renegotiate with them. But the water and sewer side, at least for residents, we're holding that flat.
So I do have a question, and maybe this is for Mr. Zipfel as well. So with the rates not increasing for 5 years, if there was a rate increase, who decides that? Does council vote on a rate increase, or would it be arbitrarily done by Mr. Masiskis?
So
in the past,
prior to my coming on board, it was linked directly to the inflation rate, CPI. It automatically happened. It was not even done administratively by the previous finance director. Of course, when I first started, CPI was at 9.1%. And I said, we're not, and council at the time was not interested in doing that. Council passed the administrative authority to say, okay, the finance director can choose the rate increase, but it has to be below whatever the CPI is. So in over that time period, we have had 1% increase. You can see all of our past rate increases on the city website. For the residential side, and the higher end, we increased a bit more than that. Currently, CPI, the most recent report came out as 4.2%. So under the previous structure, we would be bound to increase by 4.2%. We have the administrative leeway now to increase as to whatever my projections are, less than that. But I'm saying for residential, because of this payment, we're keeping that flat. I've had an ongoing goal to creep us up on that list, the Pickwa water study list.
I do have a question, and this isn't anything personal with you, but it might be something that would put the citizens at ease a little bit if council just put a freeze of rate increases for 5 years. That way we make sure that that happens, and council has to approve them. So they can't arbitrarily just be raised.
Nick, would that be ordinance or resolution?
I'm gonna have to think about that.
Just
It would be an ordinance, but I need to check with the language of 1043.
Okay.
yeah, because my only thing is I've heard a lot from a lot of people that our water rates are going to increase, that all this is going to happen. I have assured them that it's not, and I would like it to be in this council's hands to make sure that nothing increases for at least the next 5 years. Now, I'm not really worried about commercial, but I think that residential should be in the hands of council, at least for this period, if not further in the future.
I'll look into it and report back to council.
Thank you.
And to simplify a little bit what Matthew said, the rate increases before were part of the loan agreement on the water treatment plant.
Yes.
That's why those were set for a certain length of time at a certain percentage.
Actually, last year when we went out for a bond issuance on the new city building, we had our water and sewer rate, even though we weren't seeking water and sewer debt, we had our water and sewer bond rating improved because of the operational sustainability of our plant. So that's one of the reasons why we've been able to hold off for so long on those increases, further increases. Additionally, something that's inconsistent in this document, so that says it will happen in the future. It's already happened. But one of the whereases states that the city intends to pass a TIF resolution, and the parties intend to enter a separate tax increment financing agreement, TIF agreement, pursuant which, and according to the requirements of ORC 570977 through 81, parcels on the project site shall be subject to real property tax exemption and set forth in TIF resolution and TIF agreement. This is an old version. We were initially considering a TIF agreement with this site, which would allow those ongoing, the unabated portion of their property taxes to pay for public infrastructure with which directly serves that site, rather than requiring them to pay for the public infrastructure. We are not interested in that, and we have successfully removed that from the negotiation. So there will not be a TIF agreement. This will be changed before a vote. So, no TIF agreement. We already have a TIF resolution, but the spending of those funds would be up to council, and that can be for ongoing debt on the water tower. It can be for the fire station bonds that currently exist, for any new fire station bonds, as well as park improvements that generally serve the area. So, those funds from this non-abated portion are at council's pleasure, just as part of a normal budgeting process. That is it with regards to the CRA. The compensation agreement, as Nick stated, we initially were asking for $1 million for Edgewood schools. When we delve into it deeper, we're not allowed to discriminate between the school districts that serve our area. So we have to split that out into an even proportionally even amount, which is why Edgewood is getting the 940,000 and then the remainder for Butler Tech, since both of those school districts equally serve our area. That's been communicated to Edgewood Schools, and I dropped off the legal notice today. We have a good working relationship with their treasurer, and they're looking forward to that. It states within 30 days of the passage, so this summer, before the end of the next school year, or before the beginning of the next school year, rather. Are there any other questions on the CRA? Okay. With that, I'll speak just about one item on our financial snapshot, and that is the income tax. So we've been keeping a close eye on the differences, receivable and net revenue comparison between what we were at last year and what we have been with RETA. And I've nailed down the primary reason why we're about 19% behind year to date. Our withholding is stable, so businesses are still paying their required withholding. But due to some ORC changes, we're not able to follow up on non-filers until actually the end of the extension due date, that is October. Historically, we with some local authority had been able to follow up with people quicker than that. So after April 15th, we would start sending out notices if folks didn't file. Now, RETA does have to wait until October 15th due to those changes. And however, those the data that RETA will have after October 15th will be based on FTI, that is the IRS federal taxable income, and pursued in the RETA legal program next year. There's a 6-year statute that we can go back and still claim those missed revenues. I do expect, by the end of the year, we're going to be up. We'll be less than 19% behind, but that is one of the reasons, as well as our AGO was pretty aggressive in the first quarter of last year. This year, we did expect a drop off, and it has dropped off a bit. We're slightly below budget, but we're above budget in a couple other areas, as well as when we're incorporating those interest payments back into the general, incorporating a majority of the interest payments back into the general fund, we'll be able to make our general fund budget this year without any change in operation. And I'll give a more in-depth report in the June report, because that will be our half year. We also have a motion to discuss and adopt the 2027 fiscal year tax budget. So the tax budget, kind of a procedural budget. It's not actually approving the spending for 2027. It's just the understanding that we have already received our first half property tax settlements. Therefore, we can expect what our first half property tax settlements will be next year. We also incorporate our status quo operating expenses to draw against what our resources are. When we take this to the county, we show them what our revenues are based on pretty firm projections. They say, okay, this is the amount of cash you have on hand. This is the amount of revenues you expect to receive next year. This is your certificate of resources. And we take that certificate of resources. We say, okay, this is our spending limit as a part of the operating budget. That's the start of the operating budget. So the tax budget, although there are expenses shown, you're not actually approving of any expense. And this happens every year. However, I did have a little bit of projections, even though it's not really an expense-based budget. It's mostly revenue. Total revenue are submitted at $25,831,187, and expenses at $26,433,786. Current projections, as I stated, showed no residential water sewer rate increases, but 3.6% for the larger users, a garbage rate increase of 4%, and that is what we expect Rumpke to be passing on, and a street light increase of 1%. That would be 2 pennies. Aside from the $400,000 in replacement in water meters, the large capital items are not expected in 2027, since most of those projects are coming from 2025, 2026 budget. We do have a $500,000 projected surplus in the general fund, projected mostly from income tax stabilization, going back to that RETA legal program, and they would be recapturing items that they're losing out on currently. Bringing interest revenues back into the city, primarily to the general fund. And then due to bargaining contracts, the general fund police subsidy expects to increase by $360,000 for 2027. Additionally, to maintain fire operations without new levy requests, the general fund must contribute $600,000 in 2027. We have recently been contributing $300,000 a year. We expect to increase that to $600,000 to maintain fire operations. Because of that, there is a $140,000 surplus in the fire levy fund after accounting to the doubling of the general fund fire levy subsidy, as well as the continued EMS. As stated in the background information, city's tax budget is the first glimpse for planned operations in 2027. With current revenue trends continuing for the next operating year, as well as planned capital projects and standard inflationary expenses. Tax budget must be approved by the County Budget Commission prior to beginning the operating budget process. Any questions on? Nope. The only other item I did add to the agenda was a emergency sewer repair. I'll let Mr. Nichols discuss that.
There any questions? I do have a question, and maybe Mr. Ziffel misspoke on this, but you said the average tax, the income tax from the facility would be $5 million, correct?
Yeah.
That would be what the income tax they are paying, correct?
No, they're paying, they would be paying income of at least $5 million annually.
That is the comfortable amount that they have
Yeah.
decided to pledge. This was kind of a back and forth. I'm not really understanding why they decided to pledge so low. But looking at other CRA agreements that similar sized data centers in the Columbus area, they similarly have a low pledge, but I've seen their payrolls and they're significantly higher. It's one of those, they don't want to have the Carvana situation where they pledged what they actually expect to be employed, and then they don't hit that, and then we're clawing them back. It was a bit of a give and take with what they would actually pledge. We do expect to see significantly higher than that as their actual payrolls, and I have seen that in other data centers. I have not seen really something this low after they're already constructed, but this is pretty normal as a part of the agreement.
Is there any way you can have those at the next meeting, what to expect?
Yes.
As far as that, because, just doing the math right off the top of my head, I think that's an average salary of
It's like 42 grand.
Yeah, 42 grand. And to be honest with you, I mean, we're most of the ones that I've seen, their starting salary that someone right out of school walks into is 85, and most people are well over 100. So that just seemed very low to me.
I agree. Yeah.
Any additional questions?
I would also note that in the, get that,
Under your right foot.
the CRA agreement, the developer did pledge to use a portion of labor hours where the workers are employed under a collective bargaining agreement. Similarly, they used a very low, modest number, which, for the same reasons Mr. Masisklis said, it's conservative because these are pledges that we are relying upon and coming into this agreement. We don't want to breach that, but it's only at 6.5%. We do expect, and we've had discussions much like the other payroll revenue, expect a large portion of the labor on the project to be under a collective bargaining.
Is there anything we can see with that as well? Just proof-wise of
Yeah.
what? Okay.
I'll see what we can find out.
Yeah, see what you can find out just for proof-wise of that's what the typical is.
Will do.
Thank you.
That's all from me.
Thank you. Mr. Beresford.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. In front of you, there's a piece of legislation. It's an ordinance approving the editing and inclusion of certain ordinances as parts of the various component codes of the codified ordinances. providing for the adoption of new matter in the updated and revised codified ordinances, providing for the publication of such new matter, repealing ordinances and resolutions in conflict therewith, and declaring an emergency. So for new members of council, this is essentially a basic housekeeping item for a background information. Council that have originally passed the ordinances, this would essentially allow the city to update the book in my office and the website. This isn't enacting a new policy in any sort of way. This is just a basic housekeeping item. I believe those ordinances are from July 17th, 2025 through March 6th, 2026. So any questions on that? There's also 2 public hearings. There's an ordinance amending chapter 620. This is increasing the number of chickens and quails within the residential districts from 6 to 12, and to allow waste from these animals to be used as a fertilizer on site. That is for a second reading. Also, there's an ordinance amending section 1258.18. Right now, the city code says a food truck needs a mobile food service license from Butler County. The problem from that is that Ohio doesn't really use the same exact license name. There's 2 main types. There's a mobile retail food establishment and a mobile food service operation. So it's more of a cleanup item in this sort of case. It simply updates the language so our code matches state law and avoids confusion during enforcement.
Any questions? Mr. Nichols.
Thank you, Mayor Perry. On the agenda this evening, Matthew had mentioned there's a motion authorizing $138,775 for emergency sewer repairs. There was a sewer main backup that occurred on Martin Court, and in looking at the options, service department staff recommended that the least destructive approach would be lining the sanitary sewer lines instead of excavating the road and going in between 2 houses to replace that sanitary sewer line. So that is that one. And then project updates. Trenton Square with the municipal building, roof structure is being installed. Various concrete slabs are being poured throughout the building. Block masons are installing interior walls. Parking lot and second entrance construction is to begin late next week when the crane leaves the site. The crane will be gone next week. We will be done with all of the structural steel, hopefully by the end of next week. Parking lot light foundations are installed. We're still waiting results on the soil samples for Basin 3. Additionally, Miller Valentine assured us that we can run electric to the veteran site location on the park, and they're going to be stubbing that out. So that way we have electric there and we won't have to dig up any of the concrete or anything of that nature. Off-site improvements, traffic pole foundations are completed, traffic pole conduits are in place along with the pull boxes, the slotted drain installation is completed, and paving is expected tentatively for the 25th. As it relates to the splash pad, final electric is installed, landscape sprinklers are functioning and on a timer, 2 benches are not installed, waiting on the surface mount bases to show up. PSS is the subcontractor who installs these structures. They've been on another site and have scheduling conflicts finishing up that job. The note, as I sent to you all, they were supposed to be here today. I've driven out there a few times and I haven't seen any work out there. I followed up today, I believe, and sent an email to Nick to take a look at our big documents as it relates to liquidated damages for this project. Because at this point, we do not have a projected completion date, and that is something we need to get figured out. Elevated water tower, we're at 48 feet high. Foundation or Founders Park Electric should be complete next week. Cougar Electric is waiting on Duke Energy to complete the new service drop to the meter location. Still obtaining quotes for the sidewalk on Hamilton Trenton Road. Staff is also having conversations with one church as it relates to the St. Clair portion as well. So they're, I don't know if you've driven by there, they're demolishing the old farmhouse and barn and everything. And our process is to get permission from them to be able to do that and then have the conversation with St. Clair Township as well. Home Avenue ball field dirt, the dirt arrived yesterday and the intent is that it'll be installed next week. Other than that, I have a request to go into executive session to consider confidential information related to related to a request for economic development assistance under any provision identified in Ohio Revised Code 121.22 subsection G8, or that involves public infrastructure improvements or the extension of utility services that are directly related to an economic development project, as necessary to protect the interests of the applicant, or the possible investment or expenditure of public funds can be made in connection with the economic development project, and to confer with legal counsel, as well as purchase of property for public purposes.
Thank you. Council, anything else?
Mr. Nichols, have we heard anything yet on the study on linking these two intersection signals, retiming them or whatever?
I don't believe so in the past couple weeks, no, but we can certainly follow up. I know that they were working, our engineering group was working on getting items put together to get them programmed together so they can be installed. But
Yeah,
we
I
can
know they
certainly
did a
follow up.
traffic count on them. That's all that.
Mr. Croucher, you had an idea that I thought was a great idea that we should discuss with the rest of the council. Do you want to take it over, or would you like me to? So Mr. Croucher came to me, and this has been probably about a month ago. Came to me about a month ago and brought up that we're hearing a lot about how we're doing golf carts, that we should be able to drive golf carts on city roads if they're licensed and everything. I've got a complaint by a food truck owner about how we do our food truck permitting. Also, there has been, well, we heard at last meeting, there was someone talking about our fence ordinances. To be honest with you, for a city that's changing rapidly, we have been talking about reviewing all of our zoning for a very long time. And I think it's time that what we do is we put together a committee of citizens to look at our zoning and then advise council of where the changes need to be made on our zoning codes to bring us up to date where we need to be with those. Because it's been something that's been reviewed multiple times. We've had multiple complaints, and a lot of that hasn't been redone in years. So I think it's about time, and I can't think of any other way to do it than to form a committee that would look over all of our zoning and then advise council on how to proceed. Is there any thoughts from council on that?
Just a question. Would you all, is the thought to create that, that committee as an ad hoc committee, or is the thought that to amend the codified ordinances and create it as its own board, if you will?
The idea first discussed would be to make it a committee that was an ad hoc committee for a set amount of time. That way it's not a permanent committee. So we'll say, I'll just throw out there 6 months. The committee members are chosen. They sit up here like council. They discuss everything they need to do. You have somebody that chairs the committee to keep order. And then they vote on what changes need to be made. And then those changes will come to council and then so forth like everything else. But yes, think of we have the Veterans Committee. Think of the Veterans Committee only with a limited amount of time. And then if it works and we want to keep it, then we'll make it its own committee. If it has served its purpose for the time, then it'll just expire.
Would the intent be it would be a subcommittee of council or a subcommittee of planning commission kind of like the Veterans Committee was a subcommittee of Park Board. Just trying to get the organizational structure in my head so I can kind of draft something for you all.
No, absolutely. I'll take other council members' thoughts on that.
I think it's a good idea. As long as people understand that everything they come up with probably will not be passed. There's a lot of legalities involved with zoning that, you know, they're not gonna know all those ins and outs while they're discussing this. You know, as long as they go into it realizing that it's not gonna be, 100%. But we do want public's, input, because they know this community as well as any of us do, and when we've talked before about, hiring an outside firm to do this, and the thought there was like, these outside firms aren't gonna know our community as well as our residents and council and our other committees do.
But should it branch off of council or planning commission? The planning committee.
To be honest with you on this, I'm a little bit in between the two, because part of me says that it's going to go to both anyway, because it's got to be, any zoning changes have to go to planning anyway. So I honestly don't think that's to me, it doesn't matter either way, because both entities are going to be involved in the final passage of anything they recommend. So for me, it doesn't matter. It's just, who do they report to?
Who would it go to first? Planning or council?
Thinking of that now, I think it should come to council, because council always refers something like that to planning.
Yeah.
So it would seem a little bit cumbersome to go to planning
Right.
and then go to council and then go to
council, and then
planning.
we can push it to planning.
Yeah, so I think it should be reporting to council.
Council.
That works for me.
Question, just getting maybe ahead of my skis here. Would you, council, interested in a professional facilitator for that board, or just the board of residents?
The board of residents.
Just the board of residents. Just the board of residents, I think, that would have one person that facilitated the conversations about.
From city staff or an outside firm?
Or a member of the planning commission.
Yeah, or a member of the planning commission. Who chairs planning? Austin. Yeah, I don't think that would be a bad option. Just have the chair of planning commission be the facilitator.
And since he's not here, then
Yeah. Hold on. This is for in general discussion right now. We need to discuss this with the council member before we make any final decision. But
We can draft a resolution or something of that nature, kind of setting the parameters of that committee and bring that back to you all, so there can be further conversation to make sure that
Yep.
you guys
Yeah.
are good with that structure.
absolutely. All right. Anything further? All right. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to go into executive session for the reasons stated by City Manager Nichols.
So moved. Second.
Vice Mayor Croucher and Councilman Rourke. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Croucher. Yay. Mr. Rourke.
Yay.
Ms. Montgomery. Yay. Mayor Perry.
Yay.
Mr. Nichols.
Yay.
Ms. Butts.
yay.
All right, we're going into executive session at 7:09 p.m. No further business will be conducted in the work session, and we'll be back promptly at 7:30 for the council meeting. Thank you.